My brother's in the basement. He hasn't eaten since Tuesday. The whole room stopped. 20 bikers, dead silent. She was 12 years old, one shoe on, rain-soaked, left eye swollen shut purple-yellow at the edges, days old. Nobody had touched it. Nobody had fixed it. She wasn't crying. That was the thing that hit hardest. She was not crying. She stood in the middle of the Iron Skulls clubhouse like she had already cried everything out. And what was left was just the facts, and the facts were this: her 7-year-old brother was locked in a basement. And the man who put him there was the chief of police. If this story hits your heart the way it hit ours, please subscribe to this channel and follow this story all the way to the end, because justice doesn't come easy, and neither does this. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Iron Skulls didn't let just anyone walk through their door. That was a fact every soul in Blackwood, Tennessee knew. The clubhouse sat at the edge of town on a gravel lot off Route 9, surrounded by a chain-link fence with a no trespassing sign that wasn't just decoration. The men who gathered there weren't saints. Nobody pretended they were. They had records, they had scars, they had histories that polite society preferred not to think about too hard. But there was one rule that every member of the Iron Skulls held above everything else, and it was this: you never ever hurt a child. It was past 9 on a Thursday night when the door opened. Kane was at the bar, nursing his second beer, half listening to Dex argue with Rabbit about some football game from 3 weeks ago, when the door swung in and the cold October air came with it. Nobody moved at first. They thought it was the wind. Then Dex stopped mid-sentence. Then Rabbit turned around. And then every man in that room went absolutely still. She was small. She looked younger than 12, honestly, the kind of small that makes you think of a bird with a broken wing. Her dark hair was plastered against her face. Her jacket was 2 sizes too big and soaked through. She was wearing one shoe, just one, and her left eye. God, her left eye was swollen, half-shut, purple and yellow at the edge, like it had been that way for a few days and nobody had done a damn thing about it. She didn't cry. That was what got Kane first. She didn't cry. She just stood there in the doorway, scanning the room like she was trying to decide if she'd made a terrible mistake, and her eyes, one swollen, one clear, and brown and burning, landed on him. Kane set his beer down slowly. "Hey," he said. His voice came out softer than he expected. "Hey, sweetheart, you okay?" She shook her head. "You lost." She shook her head again. "You need help." And that's when she said it. That's when she opened her mouth and said the 9 words that changed everything in that room. "My brother's in the basement. He's been there for days." Nobody spoke. Kane leaned forward on the bar stool. "Say that again." "My brother." Her voice didn't shake. It was flat, deliberate, like she had rehearsed this moment 100 times and was not going to let herself fall apart now. "He's locked in our basement. He's 7 years old. He hasn't had food since Tuesday." It was Thursday. Kane was off the stool before he even made a conscious decision to move. He crossed the room in 6 strides and crouched down in front of her big man leather jacket, full beard tattoos crawling up his neck, and he looked her dead in the eye. "Who locked him in there?" Her jaw tightened, just for a second, like she was steeling herself for something. "My stepfather," she said. "What's his name?" She held his gaze. Didn't flinch. Didn't blink. "Marcus Thorne." The sound that moved through the room was not a gasp. It was more like a sharp collective exhale, the sound of 20 men processing something that didn't quite make sense and yet made all the sense in the world. Dex was the first one to say it out loud. "Marcus Thorne, as in the chief of police," Rabbit finished. His voice was flat, stunned. Kane didn't take his eyes off the girl. "What's your name?" "Lily." "Lily," he said it gently. "I need you to tell me everything." Her full name was Lily Vance. She was 12 years and 4 months old. She had been living with Marcus Thorne for 3 years, ever since her mother Sandra had married him when Lily was 9 and her brother Leo was 4. Before Marcus, it had been just the 3 of them, Sandra, Lily, Leo, in a little apartment on Chestnut Street, eating cereal for dinner, sometimes, and watching movies on a secondhand TV, and being, as Lily put it, poor but okay. Marcus had seemed like a rescue. He was tall, handsome in that authoritative way, always in uniform or a good suit. He spoke the way men speak when they're used to being listened to. He brought Sandra flowers. He fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom. He made Leo laugh at the dinner table. He took Lily to her soccer games and clapped when she scored, even though he barely knew the rules. He was perfect, Lily said. She was sitting on the couch now, a dry blanket around her shoulders, and a mug of hot cocoa in her hands that Big Tom had made. Big Tom, who nobody in Blackwood would have guessed could even operate a stove. For about 8 months, he was perfect. Kane sat across from her. The rest of the club had filtered into the room, standing or sitting, all of them quiet in a way that was unusual for this group of men. And then, Kane asked. Lily looked down at the mug. He started with small things, like he'd grab Leo's arm too hard if Leo was being loud. And I told my mom, and she said Marcus had a stressful job and sometimes he just needed the house to be quiet. She paused. Then it wasn't small things anymore. She didn't go into details. Kane didn't push her to. When did your brother end up in the basement? He asked. Monday night. Her voice didn't waver, but her knuckles went white around the mug. Leo knocked over Marcus's trophy, the one from his service award ceremony. It didn't even break, it just fell. And Marcus, she stopped, took a breath. Marcus picked Leo up by his shirt and carried him downstairs and locked the door. And he told my mom that Leo needed to learn a lesson about respecting other people's things. And your mom didn't? My mom is scared of him. It came out flat. Not angry, not sad, just stated the way you state a fact you've already made peace with. She's been scared of him for a long time. She cried outside the basement door for 2 nights, but she didn't open it, because if she opened it, he'd know. Kane felt something shift in his chest. Where's your mom now? Home. Lily looked up. He sent her to her sister's house today. He said she needed a break. I think he sent her away so she wouldn't be there if... She stopped again, pressed her lips together. I think he sent her away because Leo's getting worse. The room went very quiet. How bad? Kane asked. Lily set the mug down on the coffee table, carefully, precisely. Then she looked Kane straight in the eye. When I put food through the gap under the door this morning, he didn't take it. He always takes it. I've been sneaking him crackers and water. But this morning, the crackers were still there when I got home from school. She paused. Leo always takes the crackers. Kane stood up. Where's the house? 117 Magnolia Drive. Dex was already reaching for his jacket. Rabbit was on his feet. Big Tom set down his coffee cup with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. Wait! Lily's voice came sharp and sudden. Every man stopped. She was looking at Kane with those burning eyes, one swollen, one clear. You have to understand something, she said. He's the chief of police. He has friends everywhere. If you just go over there and break the door down, he'll arrest all of you and nobody will help Leo. I've thought about this. I've been thinking about this for 3 days. Kane looked at her for a long moment. How old did you say you were? 12? 12 years old, and you spent 3 days coming up with a plan. I had to be sure it would work. Her chin lifted, just slightly. I didn't come here for a scene. I came here for help. Real help. Something passed across Kane's face. Not quite a smile. Something harder than that and deeper. All right, he said. Talk to me. Her plan was simple, and because of that, it was smart. She had spent 3 days observing Marcus's patterns, what time he left the house, what time he came back, which neighbors were likely to call the police if they saw a commotion, which ones kept their heads down. She knew that Marcus's patrol lieutenant, a man named Garrett, was loyal to Marcus, personally, not professionally. She knew that 2 of the town's 4 dispatch operators had complained about Marcus in the past year. She knew that Dr. Elaine Croft, the pediatrician 2 streets over, had treated Leo twice in the past 18 months for injuries that Marcus had explained away with stories that didn't quite line up. Lily had written all of this down in a small notebook she kept inside her left shoe, which Kane now understood was why she was wearing only one shoe. Her right shoe was at home where Marcus might look. The notebook was on her foot. She pulled it out and handed it to Kane. He opened it. The handwriting was careful and small, like she'd been trying to fit as much as possible on each page without wasting space. There were names, times, dates, addresses, phone numbers. There was a diagram of the house, the layout of the ground floor where the basement door was, which windows didn't lock properly, which neighbor's camera angle might catch the front steps. Kane flipped through it slowly. When he got to the last page, he stopped. At the top, in slightly larger letters than the rest, Lily had written, "He keeps files. Bottom drawer of the desk and in his office. He doesn't know I've seen them." "What kind of files?" Kane asked quietly. Lily looked at him. "The kind that explain why certain cases in this town never went anywhere. The kind that have names and numbers and dates that I don't fully understand, but I know they're not supposed to exist." Dex made a low sound. "She's saying he's got evidence of his own corruption stashed in his home office." "Evidence he thought was safe," Rabbit said. "Because who's going to search the chief's house?" Big Tom muttered. "Right." Kane closed the notebook. He held it for a moment, feeling its weight, this small, beat-up, spiral-bound notebook that a 12-year-old girl had filled with 3 days of silent, terrified, meticulous observation. He thought about what it had cost her to sit in that house and watch and wait and write things down while her 7-year-old brother lay in a basement 2 floors below her. He handed the notebook back to her. "You keep that," he said. "That's yours. We're going to need it." She took it, tucked it back inside her shoe, laced the shoe back up. "Can you get my brother out?" she asked. "Yes," Kane said, no hesitation. "And can you make sure Marcus can't hurt him again? Not just tonight. Ever." Kane looked at her for a long moment. "That's why we're taking the files." They moved fast after that. Kane pulled 4 men aside, Dex, Rabbit, Big Tom, and a quiet veteran named Hatch, who had skills that didn't get discussed in polite company. The rest of the club had a different job, be visible somewhere else. Make sure there were witnesses placing Iron Skull's members at the bar, at the gas station on 5th, at the diner on Route 9. If Marcus tried to come after the club, there needed to be an alibi infrastructure that would buy them time. "You're organized," Lily said, watching Kane give instructions. "When it matters," he said. "Do you do this a lot? Help kids?" He looked at her sideways. "We help people who can't get help anywhere else." She was quiet for a moment. "Why?" It wasn't a challenge. It was a genuine question, the kind a 12-year-old asks when she's trying to understand why the world works differently than she thought it did. Kane thought about how to answer that. He thought about a lot of things he didn't usually think about at 9 o'clock on a Thursday night. He thought about a boy he used to be a long time ago in a house with a locked door. He thought about how nobody came. "Because somebody should have done it for us," he said. Lily looked at him for 3 full seconds. Then she nodded once, like she understood something that went beyond the words. "Okay," she said. "Let's go." She wasn't supposed to come. Kane had been clear about that. "You stay here with Big Tom. I know the layout of the house. I have your diagram. The diagram doesn't show you where the basement lock is. It's a padlock, and he keeps the key on the hook inside the pantry, 3rd shelf behind the canned tomatoes. You won't find it without me." Kane opened his mouth, closed it. He looked at Dex. Dex shrugged. "She's not wrong." "She's 12, Glum. She's the one who got here," Rabbit said quietly. "She got herself here, through the rain, with one shoe. I think she can handle coming back." Kane turned back to Lily. "You stay behind me. You do what I say. You don't argue, you don't hesitate, you don't try to be brave. Understood." "Understood. And the second your brother is out of that basement, you and he go to the back of the line behind all of us. No exceptions." "Okay." "Say it." She met his eyes. "No exceptions." He held her gaze for 1 more second. Then he picked up his jacket. "Let's go get your brother." 117 Magnolia Drive was dark when they rolled up 5 bikes, cutting their engines, half a block back, rolling the rest of the way in silence. No lights on the 1st floor. A single light upstairs, Marcus's office, Lily confirmed in a low voice, which meant he was in there, which meant the filing cabinet was 1 floor directly above them, and Marcus was sitting 10 feet from evidence that could put him away for a very long time, and he didn't know it yet. Kane looked at the house. Then he looked at Lily. "Front door or back?" "Back," she said immediately. "The back door doesn't deadbolt from the inside because the mechanism broke 6 months ago and Marcus kept saying he'd fix it. He never fixed it." Dex almost laughed. "Almost." They went around the back. The door opened in 4 seconds. They moved through the dark kitchen in a line, Kane first, Lily right behind him, Dex, Rabbit, Hatch last. The house smelled like furniture polish and something else, something chemical and cold that Kane couldn't name but felt in the back of his throat. Lily stopped at the pantry door, opened it. reached to the third shelf without looking, moved 2 cans of tomatoes aside, and lifted a small silver padlock key. She held it out to Kane. He took it. The basement door was at the end of the hall. The padlock was there, a heavy-duty thing, commercial grade, the kind you'd put on a storage unit or a gate, not the kind you'd put on a door inside your home unless you wanted to make sure whatever was on the other side stayed there. Kane's jaw was tight as he fit the key into the lock. It turned. He pulled the door open. The smell hit them first, damp and cold and closed-in smell of a space without ventilation. Then the dark, pure deep, the kind of dark that swallows everything. Leo, Lily's voice broke for the first time. Just slightly, just at the edges. She stepped past Kane and said it again louder. Leo, it's me, it's Lily, you're safe. Silence. Then from deep in the dark, a sound. Small, papery, barely there. Lily, she made a sound that Kane would remember for the rest of his life. It was the sound of a 12-year-old girl who had been holding everything together by sheer force of will for 3 days and 4 nights and had just heard the one sound that meant she could finally breathe. She went down the stairs. Kane was right behind her. Leo Vance was 7 years old and he was sitting in the far corner of the basement, wrapped in an old blanket that had been down there for who knows how long, and he was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. He was small, smaller than Kane expected, and his face when the light from Dex's phone hit, it was pale and sunken and streaked with old tears. But he was alive. He looked up at Kane with eyes that were too big for his face and said nothing. Just looked. Hey, bud, Kane said, keeping his voice low and easy the way you'd talk to an animal that had been cornered too long. My name's Kane. Your sister came and got me. We're going to get you out of here. Leo looked at Lily. Lily crouched in front of him. I told you I'd come back, she said. I told you. Leo reached out and grabbed her hand. Didn't let go. Kane turned to Hatch. Get him upstairs. Wrap him up. Get him to the bikes. Hatch nodded and moved to the stairs. Rabbit went with him. Kane turned to Dex. Office is upstairs. Second door on the left, she said. Dex was already moving. Kane looked back at the 2 children. Lily was helping Leo up the stairs, one arm around him, murmuring something too low to hear. Leo was walking barely. His legs were unsteady, the walk of someone who hadn't been able to fully stand in too long. Kane stood at the bottom of those stairs and thought about Marcus Thorne. Marcus Thorne in his uniform, in his service award, in his handshake, in his smile, and felt something cold and absolute settle in his chest. They would get the files. They would get the children out. And Marcus Thorne, chief of police, pillar of the community, proud owner of a service award that had just been knocked over by a 7-year-old boy, Marcus Thorne, was going to answer for every single day of this. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Kane looked up. The light in the office was still on. Then from overhead came the sound of a door opening. And then Marcus Thorne's voice, deep, controlled, cold as a January morning. Who the hell is in my house? Marcus Thorne's voice came down the stairs like a fist through drywall. Controlled, deliberate, the voice of a man who had never once in his adult life needed to raise it to get what he wanted. I said, who the hell is in my house? Kane didn't move. He stood at the base of the basement stairs, and he listened to the sound of a man walking across the floor directly above him, and he calculated. Marcus hadn't come downstairs yet. He was in the hallway. He could hear voices low male, and he hadn't called it in yet, which meant he was still deciding whether this was a threat or a misunderstanding, which meant they had maybe 30 seconds before that decision got made. Kane turned and went up the basement stairs in 4 fast steps. He came out into the hallway just as Marcus reached the top of the staircase from the 2nd floor. They saw each other at the same moment. Marcus Thorne was still in his uniform. That was the first thing Kane noticed, still dressed at nearly 10 at night badge, on his chest, gun on his hip, like he'd never quite stopped being on duty, or like he'd wanted to be ready. He was a big man, broad through the shoulders, the kind of man who had clearly been athletic once and had let it harden into something blunter and more imposing with age. His hair was silver at the temples. His face was the face of every man who had ever stood in front of a camera and looked trustworthy. He looked at Kane. He looked at the basement door hanging open behind Kane. He looked at the padlock in Kane's hand, the padlock still attached to the key, Lily's key, the one from behind the canned tomatoes on the 3rd shelf. And something passed across his face. Something that was not quite fear and not quite anger, but was the particular expression of a man who has been very careful for a very long time and has just realized that careful wasn't careful enough. "You want to tell me," Marcus said slowly, "what you are doing in my house?" "I want to tell you a lot of things," Kane said, "but we can start with the basement." Marcus's eyes went cold. "That's private property. You are trespassing in the home of a law enforcement officer. Do you understand what that means for you?" "I understand what a 7-year-old boy alone in a basement for 3 days means for you." The hallway went silent. Marcus took one step down the staircase. Just one, like he was measuring the distance between them. "Leo is being disciplined. That is a family matter, and it is none of your concern." "Disciplined." Kane said the word back to him, flat and empty, the way you repeat something to show that you've heard it and found it obscene. He hadn't eaten since Tuesday. "That is a lie." His sister counted. Something shifted in Marcus's face. Just slightly, just around the eyes. "Where is Lily?" It wasn't a question, it was a demand. And the way he said it, not with worry, not with relief, but with a sharp, possessive urgency, told Kane everything he needed to know about what Lily's night would have looked like if she hadn't walked through the Iron Skull's door. "Lily's safe," Kane said. "Lily is my daughter, stepdaughter, and she came to us, which tells you everything about how safe she felt in this house." Kane held Marcus's gaze. "Where we're standing right now, you and me, this is the easy part. This is me being reasonable. You don't want to find out what I look like when I stop being reasonable." Marcus laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, and it held genuine contempt. "You are a criminal. You run an outlaw motorcycle club out of a shack on Route 9. You have 3 priors and 2 of your members are on supervised release. You think you can walk into my home and threaten me?" He reached for his radio. "I'm going to call this in, and by the time I'm done, every unit in this county will be outside that door. And you will spend the rest of the year explaining to a judge why you broke into a police chief's residence. Before you do that," Kane said, "you might want to check your office." Marcus's hand stopped on the radio. His eyes didn't move from Kane's face, but something in them changed. A tiny, nearly invisible flicker, like a light behind a curtain. There and gone. "What did you say?" "I said you might want to check your office. Bottom drawer, left side." The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. Kane counted them. Then Marcus Thorne's face did something Kane had not expected. It went very briefly, completely blank. Not angry, not threatening. Blank. The blankness of a man who has just heard the thing he most feared hearing and is running emergency calculations behind his eyes. Then the radio came up. "Unit 7, this is Thorne. I need..." Dex came out of the office doorway at the top of the stairs. He had a manila folder in one hand and his phone in the other, and the phone was up, the camera was on, and he looked down at Marcus Thorne with the particular expression of a man who has just found exactly what he was looking for. "Hey, Chief," Dex said pleasantly. "You want to tell me whose signatures are on these payment records? Because I'm looking at about 11 names I recognize, and one of them is the county DA. Marcus lowered the radio. His jaw was tight. His chest was moving fast, not panicking, not yet, but close, the controlled fast breathing of someone trying to stay on top of a situation that is sliding out of their hands. "Put that down. Those are confidential documents. Those are police evidence files. In your house," Dex said, "in your personal desk, not at the station, not in evidence lockup, in your house in a locked drawer." He tilted his head. "Why would a cop keep evidence at home, Chief? Why would a cop keep evidence at home in a locked drawer that he didn't file with the department?" "Because it's mine." The words came out before Marcus could stop them. He seemed to realize what he'd said a half second after he said it. He reset. "Because I was building a case. Personal investigation. Ongoing. You have no right to those documents." "You're right," Dex said agreeably. "We don't. But funny thing about photographs," he held up his phone, turned the screen toward Marcus. "We don't need the originals." Marcus took 2 steps down the staircase. His hand was on his sidearm, not drawing. Just resting there, the way a man rests his hand on something powerful when he wants you to notice he has it. "I will arrest every single one of you. I will have this club shut down. I will make sure every member of the Iron Skulls is sitting in a cell by morning if you do not put those documents back where you found them and get out of my house right now." Kane didn't step back. He had not moved once since Marcus came down those stairs. He stood exactly where he had been standing, relaxed in the way of men who have been in serious situations enough times to know that stillness reads as power. And he looked at Marcus Thorne with the quiet level attention of someone who has already decided how this ends. "Leo's gone," Kane said. Marcus blinked. "Your stepson, he's not in the basement anymore. He's outside with my guys. We're taking him to the hospital." Kane paused. "And your stepdaughter is with us too. So before you start talking about what you're going to do to this club, you should think about what happens when those two kids sit in front of a doctor. And that doctor writes down what they see. And that report goes somewhere you can't control." The color left Marcus Thorne's face. Not all at once. Gradually, the way water drains from something starting at his temples, moving down. He was still standing straight. He was still holding the radio. But the certainty that had been in his eyes 30 seconds ago was gone, replaced by something that Kane recognized with grim satisfaction. Calculation. Desperate, frantic, real-time calculation. "Leo fell," Marcus said. His voice was lower now. "Careful. He was injured in a fall 2 weeks ago. Any marks on him are from a fall. He's 7 pounds underweight. He's always been small. And Lily's IA," Marcus's jaw tightened. "She got into a fight at school. I have the incident report." "You wrote the incident report," Kane said flatly. "There are procedures. You are the procedure." Kane took one step forward. Just one. "That's what you counted on, isn't it? That you're the one who makes the calls. You're the one who decides which complaints go somewhere and which ones disappear. You've been running this town like it's your personal property for how long, Marcus? 3 years. Maya, how many people tried to say something, and how many of them found out real fast that saying something in Blackwood, when you're the one saying it, to only get you talked to by someone you work for?" Something happened to Marcus Thorne's face in that moment, something that Kane hadn't expected, and that landed harder than the anger had. His composure cracked just for a second, just a hairline fracture, and what came through was not guilt. It wasn't shame. It was something colder than either. It was grievance. Genuine, self-righteous, burning grievance. "I built this town," Marcus said, and his voice had dropped to something almost conversational, which somehow made it worse. "I gave 30 years to this badge. 30 years. I kept this town safe. I kept it clean. I made decisions that nobody else had the stomach to make, and I kept my mouth shut about all of it, and I kept this community functioning. And I come home to my house to have some biker, trash with a rap sheet, stand in my hallway and talk to me about what I owe anyone." He shook his head. "You have no idea what I've done for this town." "You put a 7-year-old in a basement," Kane said. "I disciplined a child who does not respect." "You put a 7-year-old in a basement for 3 days with no food. He needs to learn. He's 7 years old." The words came out with a force that surprised even Kane. Not shouting lower than that, harder than that, the force of something that had been compressed and had nowhere left to go. The hallway went dead still. "He is 7 years old. He doesn't need to learn anything from you. He needs to never see you again." Marcus stared at him, then he raised the radio. "This is Chief Thorne. I need all available units to 117 Magnolia. This is not a drill. I have multiple intruders in my home. One who is armed." "I'm not armed," Kane said. "Approach with caution." "Dex," Kane said. Dex was already on his phone, not texting. A call, and whoever picked up on the other end picked up fast because Dex was talking within 2 seconds. "Yeah, it's happening. Yeah, right now. You ready?" A pause. "Okay, go." Marcus lowered the radio. "Who are you calling?" Dex lowered his phone and looked at Marcus with a calm, almost gentle expression. "You know a Dr. Elaine Croft. She lives on Birchwood, couple streets over. She's actually been trying to get someone to look into your family for about 8 months now. Filed a report with the county in February, and another one in June, both of which," he snapped his fingers, "disappeared." Marcus said nothing. "She's on the phone right now with the state CPS emergency line," Dex said, "and she has copies of both reports. Turns out she kept copies. Funny how people keep copies when they don't trust the local system." He tilted his phone so Marcus could see the screen, the photographs of the documents, clean and bright and damning. And she also has a very interesting voicemail from February 7th, where someone who sounds a lot like you calls her and tells her that if she files another complaint, she's going to find her medical license under review. The radio fell out of Marcus's hand. It hit the floor with a sound like a gunshot in that quiet hallway. He did not pick it up. He was looking at Dex with an expression that Kane had seen before on other faces in other situations, the expression of a man who has just watched the last exit close. He was still standing. His back was still straight. But something essential had shifted in him. Some load-bearing structure in his certainty had given way. And Kane could see him trying to redistribute the weight and finding that there was nowhere left for it to go. "You had one chance to keep this in this hallway," Kane said. "You could have opened that door tonight yourself. You could have let your stepson out and gotten him help and stood up and said, 'I have a problem. I did something wrong. I need help.' That would have been the end of this, not a good end, but an end with some dignity in it." He paused. "You didn't do that." "You don't know anything about me," Marcus said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I know you kept a key in a pantry," Kane said, "because you wanted to be able to get in whenever you decided he'd been in long enough. And that tells me everything I need to know. A man who loses control doesn't keep a key in a pantry. He loses the key, he breaks the lock. He feels terrible and fixes it in the morning. But you kept a key in a pantry because it wasn't loss of control." Kane's voice stayed level, absolutely level. It was control. That's what this was, all of it. The whole thing. The silence stretched. From outside, from somewhere beyond the back door in the cold October air of the backyard came the sound of a child coughing. Leo, 7 years old, wrapped in a blanket, coughing in the cold outside the house where he'd spent 3 days in a basement. Marcus Thorne heard it. Kane watched him hear it. Watched something move through the man's face that might in another person have been something close to the beginning of something like remorse. But it hardened before it got there, calcified back into that cold, self-righteous certainty, and Marcus's chin came up and he took a breath and opened his mouth to say something that was probably going to be a threat or a denial or another appeal to his own importance. And then the front door opened. Not the back door, the front door. And standing in the doorway with the cold night air and the distant sound of a siren that was getting closer but was still blocks away was Sandra Vance, Marcus's wife, Lily and Leo's mother, the woman he had sent to her sister's house to keep her from being present for whatever tonight was going to be. She had come back. She was still in her coat like she'd never fully arrived wherever he'd sent her. And her eyes went from Marcus to Kane to the basement door hanging open and the padlock on the floor and the radio at Marcus's feet and the manila folder in Dex's hands. She took all of it in over the span of about 5 seconds. Then she looked at Marcus. "Where is Leo?" she said. Her voice was quiet, so quiet you almost couldn't hear it, but it was the quietest, stablest thing in that entire hallway. Marcus opened his mouth. "Sandra, you need to go back to your sister's. We have a situation here." "Marcus?" She said his name like a door closing. Where is?" "My son." Before he could answer, from outside, right outside, close enough to be right on the other side of the wall, came Lily's voice, clear and high and certain. Mom, we're out here. Leo's out here." Sandra Vance walked past her husband without looking at him, walked past Kane, walked through the hallway in the kitchen and out the back door without a single word, and the only sound she made was the sound of the door closing behind her, the three of them. Kane, Dex, Marcus stood in the hallway. In the distance, the siren was getting closer. Marcus looked at Kane. "I want a lawyer," he said. "That's probably smart," Kane said. "Whatever you think you have, it won't hold. I know every judge in this county. I know how this system works. Whatever you found in that office, whatever that doctor is saying, whatever those kids, it won't hold. Cases like this don't hold. You know that as well as I do." Kane looked at him. "Maybe," he said. "But here's the thing about cases like this, Marcus." He picked up the fallen radio from the floor, held it out in his palm and let Marcus look at it. "The cases don't hold when the chief of police makes them go away, and you're not going to be the chief of police by morning." The siren stopped outside. The front door opened again. State police, not local, the call Dex had made going over Marcus's head entirely to a contact in the State Division who had been waiting for exactly this kind of opening for longer than tonight. And Marcus Thorne, chief of police, pillar of the community, 30-year veteran of the badge, stood in his own hallway with his hands at his sides and his radio on someone else's palm and his bottom desk drawer empty. And he understood, maybe for the first time in a long time, maybe for the first time in his life, that there was nobody left to call. Outside, Sandra had her arms around Leo. And Lily was standing next to Kane's bike with her arms crossed and her one shoe on and her one shoe off, watching the front door with those burning eyes, one swollen, one clear. And when the state police came through and Marcus was walked out in handcuffs past the Iron Skulls lined up along the driveway, she didn't cheer. She didn't cry. She just watched. Like someone who had planned this moment for 3 days and needed to see that all the way to the end before she could believe it was real. Kane walked over and stood beside him. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. Then Lily said, "He said cases like this don't hold." "I heard him." "Is he right?" Kane was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Not this time." She looked up at him. "How do you know?" "Because this time," he said, "he's not the one deciding." She held his gaze. Then she looked back at the police car where Marcus was being put into the back seat, and something in her shoulders changed, something subtle, something that had been locked up tight for a very long time and was just beginning, slowly and cautiously, the way a fist unclenches after holding too hard for too long to let go. And somewhere behind her, Leo was coughing in his mother's arms in the October cold, and Sandra was making the sound that mothers make when they are holding something they almost lost. And the Iron Skulls stood in the driveway of 117 Magnolia Drive like they belonged there, because tonight they did. But Marcus Thorne was not the only secret in Blackwood. And in the back seat of that state police car, as it pulled away from the curb, he pulled out his personal cell phone, the one that wasn't registered, the one nobody knew he had, and he typed one word into a text message and sent it to a number that wasn't saved under any name. One word: run. The text message left Marcus Thorne's phone at 10:47 p.m. By 10:48, Kane's phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. He pulled it out. One message from Hatch, who was still inside the house doing a final sweep. 3 words found a phone. Kane turned around and walked back through the front door before the state police cruiser had even cleared the end of the block. Hatch was standing in the kitchen holding an evidence bag, not an official one, just a Ziploc from the cabinet drawer, the kind of practical improvisation Hatch had always been good at. And inside it was a slim black prepaid phone, the kind you buy at a gas station with cash and register to nobody. Hatch had found it taped to the underside of the kitchen counter behind the dishwasher panel. Not hidden the way you hide something you rarely use. Hidden the way you hide something you need to get to fast. "It was still unlocked when I found it," Hatch said. "Screen was on." He sent something right before they put him in the car. Kane took the bag and looked at the screen through the plastic. The sent message was right there at the top of the thread. One word: run. The number it went to was just that, a number. No name, no contact saved, nothing. "Can you trace it?" Kane asked. "Not tonight," Hatch said, "but I know someone who can do it faster than the state police will bother to." "Call them." Hatch was already dialing. Kane stood in Marcus Thorne's kitchen holding a prepaid phone in a Ziploc bag and thought about that word. Run. Not a name, not an explanation, not "they found the files" or "get out of the house" or "call a lawyer." Just run. The language of someone who didn't need to explain, who knew the person on the other end, would understand exactly what it meant and exactly what to do. Which meant there was someone else. Someone who had been part of this long enough to have a protocol. Someone who knew what running looked like and had been ready to do it. Kane walked back outside. Lily was still standing by his bike. Sandra and Leo had been moved to Rabbit's SUV. Rabbit kept an SUV for situations like this practical man, and Leo was bundled in the back seat with his mother's arms around him and a bottle of water and a pack of crackers that Big Tom had produced from somewhere, and Leo was eating the crackers with the focused intensity of a child who had been hungry for a very long time and was not wasting a single one. Kane watched him eat for a second. Then he looked at Lily. "Your stepfather had a second phone," he said, "hidden in the kitchen. He sent a message from it right before they put him in the car." Lily's expression didn't change. Not surprise, not shock. She just nodded slowly the way someone nods when they hear a thing they already suspected. I knew about the phone, she said. Kane stared at her. You knew. I saw him use it once. About 4 months ago, he was in the kitchen and he didn't hear me come downstairs. He put it away fast, but I saw it. She paused. I didn't know who he was calling, but I knew it wasn't nothing. Did you write it in the notebook? She reached down without a word and unlaced her shoe. She opened the notebook to a page near the back and turned it toward him. There in her careful small handwriting was a description of the phone, the color, the approximate size, the date she'd seen it, and Kane felt his breath catch a partial number. 6 digits of the receiving number, the one she'd managed to see before Marcus had closed the screen. Kane looked up at her. Lily, he said quietly, did anyone ever tell you that you are something else? She laced her shoe back up. Not really, she said. Mostly people just didn't pay attention. He took a picture of the page with his phone and sent it to Hatch. Then he pulled out his own phone and called Dex. How fast can your guy in Nashville cross-reference a partial number? Dex didn't ask questions. Give me 20 minutes. They had 15 before everything changed again. The state police detective assigned to the scene was a woman named Agent Carol Reyes, mid-40s, sharp eyes, the kind of efficient stillness that comes from doing this job for a long time and learning that urgency and panic are not the same thing. She had arrived about 10 minutes after the cruiser took Marcus away, and she had done a walkthrough of the house with 2 of her people, and now she was standing in the driveway with a notepad and looking at Kane with an expression that was professionally neutral, but not unfriendly. You want to tell me how you got in? She asked. Back door was unlocked, Kane said. The back door that has a broken deadbolt mechanism. Yes, ma'am. And you knew about that because the girl told us. Reyes looked at Lily, then back at Kane, and the files in the office. Found the door open, Kane said. Dex saw them from the doorway. Reyes looked at Dex. Dex, to his credit, looked completely serene. I didn't touch anything, he said, just photographed them where they were. The photographs Kane knew were already in 4 separate cloud accounts and 2 email inboxes that were not in Tennessee. Whatever happened next, the photographs existed, and they existed in places that Marcus Thorne's professional network could not reach. Reyes was quiet for a moment. Then she said, the Iron Skulls have been on the state task force's radar for a long time. I know, Kane said. You've got members with records. I know that too. And you walked into the home of the chief of police. I walked into a house where a 7-year-old boy was locked in a basement. Kane held her gaze. You can charge me if you need to, but before you decide, go look at that kid in the back of the SUV and tell me what you would have done. Reyes held his gaze for a long moment. Then she clicked her pen and wrote something in her notepad and said, I'm going to need full statements from everyone tonight. We'll be here, Kane said. She walked away. Kane exhaled. Then Dex's phone rang. He picked it up, listened for 11 seconds, and then looked at Kane with an expression that meant something had just cracked open that they weren't prepared for. The partial number, Dex said slowly. My guy matched it. Full number. And the account, it's registered to the registered account is fake. Shell company. But the billing address on the shell company runs back to a real address. He paused. It's the Blackwood County Courthouse. Kane felt something go very still inside him. Which office? 3rd floor, Dex said. District Attorney's office. The sound that came out of Kane wasn't a curse and wasn't a word. It was the sound a man makes when a thing that was almost too big to believe becomes suddenly and irreversibly real. He turned away from Dex and faced the street, the ordinary quiet street of Magnolia Drive, the dark houses, the yellow porch lights, the sound of distant traffic, and he let himself have exactly 3 seconds of pure, unfiltered reaction. Then he turned back around. Garrett, he said, Marcus's patrol lieutenant, the one Lily had mentioned in her notebook, loyal to Marcus, personally, not professionally. Garrett is small, Dex said. This is not Garrett. Kane thought about what Marcus had said in the hallway. I know every judge in this county. He'd thought it was arrogance, empty threat, the bluster of a man who knew how to use his position as a weapon. But it wasn't arrogance. It was a statement of fact. He did know every judge. He knew the DA. He knew how this worked because he had built the system himself stone by stone over years with the DA's billing address on a shell company and a prepaid phone taped under a kitchen counter. Lily had been right. This was not just abuse behind closed doors. This was infrastructure. This was architecture. This was a man who had made himself so load-bearing to the local system that pulling him out of it would bring pieces of it down with him, and he had known that and used it, and every time someone had tried to say something, it had disappeared into a machine that he had designed specifically to make things disappear. Until a 12-year-old girl with a notebook in her shoe had walked into the wrong clubhouse. The right clubhouse. The only one in Blackwood that was completely outside Marcus Thorne's machine. Does Reyes know? Kane asked. Not yet. We need to tell her, tonight, before anyone in that courthouse gets the chance to react to Marcus's message. Dex nodded. There's one more thing. He held up his phone. My guy did a wider pull on the number. Call history for the past 6 months. Marcus called it 47 times. But 3 of those calls, 3 weren't initiated by Marcus. He paused. The DAA called him. The call logs don't show content, but 2 of those 3 calls happened within 24 hours of a case disappearing from the docket. Once in March, once in August. Kane looked at Dex for a long moment. Then he turned and walked straight toward Agent Reyes. She saw him coming and read something in his face and straightened up. What? I need 5 minutes, Kane said, and you need to listen to all of it before you say anything. She listened. She was good at listening, that still professional attention that didn't interrupt and didn't react visibly, just absorbed. When Kane finished, she asked 2 questions. The first was, where's the phone now? The second was, who else knows this? Kane told her. She made 2 calls in quick succession, walking away from him to make them turning her back. When she came back, her face had not changed, but her energy had a tightening, a focus, the particular alertness of someone who has just been handed something much larger than they came for. We're going to need the phone, she said. It's in his kitchen. And the photographs your man took of the files, already sent to 3 locations that aren't in this county. You'll get everything, but I want something in return. Reyes looked at him steadily. You're in no position to tempt. Not for me, Kane said. For the kids. I want someone with the kids tonight who isn't connected to the local system. Your people, not county. I want Leo at a hospital that isn't Blackwood. General Blackwood, General's chief of staff, plays golf with Marcus every other Sunday. And I want Sandra Vance and those 2 children in a location that Marcus's contacts don't know about before Marcus makes his 1 phone call. Reyes studied him. You've thought about this? Lily thought about most of it, Kane said. I'm just finishing her sentences. Something moved through Rhea's expression, something that wasn't quite professional and wasn't quite personal, somewhere in between. She nodded once. I can do all 3. Then you've got your phone. It was Hatch who brought it out, still in the Ziploc handled clean, and Reyes took it with gloved hands and walked it to her car, and Kane watched her make a 3rd phone call that was longer than the first 2 and conducted in a voice too low to hear from where he was standing. He walked back to Lily. She had been watching the whole exchange from beside his bike with those burning eyes, not missing a thing. She's good, Lily said when he got close. The agent. She is. Is she going to fix it? Kane was quiet for a second. She's going to start fixing it. It's bigger than tonight. Lily absorbed that. The DA, she said. Kane looked at her sharply. She looked back at him with a completely level expression. I said I didn't understand some of what was in the files. I didn't say all of it. She held his gaze. I saw the DA's name, twice. Different documents, same name. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it meant something. She paused. That's why I came to you instead of another police station. Because I didn't know how far it went. I just knew it went somewhere. Kane stood very still. How long have you been carrying this? 3 days, she said. In my shoe. He thought about that. A 12-year-old girl sitting in a house with her brother in the basement and her mother under her stepfather's thumb, going to school in the mornings and coming home in the afternoons, and sitting in her room with a notebook on her knee, writing down everything she'd seen and everything she'd figured out, carrying it alone for 72 hours because she didn't know who she could trust and she couldn't afford to be wrong. Lily, he said, Yeah. After tonight, after all of this is done, you're going to be okay. You know that, right? She was quiet for a moment. The October wind moved between them. From inside the SUV, they could hear the faint sound of Sandra Vance talking to Leo in a low voice, the particular tone of a mother relearning that her child was real and present and within reach. I don't know that yet, Lily said honestly, but I think I'm going to try to be. Kane nodded. That's enough for tonight. His phone buzzed. He looked at it. A text from a number he didn't recognize, and then his blood ran cold because the text was 3 words, and they were not a threat and not a warning. They were worse than both. She saw everything. He read it twice. Then again, his mind went through the possible senders in rapid succession, hatched Dex Rabbit, Big Tom Reyes, and landed nowhere because none of them had this number. This was his personal number, the one he gave to almost nobody, the one that was not connected to the club's public contacts. He turned the screen off, turned it back on, read it a 4th time. She saw everything. She. Who was she? Lily? Sandra Reyes? Someone else entirely? Someone they hadn't accounted for? Someone who had been watching tonight unfold from somewhere close enough to see and far enough away to remain invisible until now. He looked up from the phone. He looked at the street, the quiet houses, the yellow porch lights. He looked at the neighbors who had drifted to their front windows or their front steps in the way that people do when something official is happening on their block. That careful, plausibly deniable watching, that means I want to know what's happening, but I don't want to be involved. And then he looked at the house directly across the street. 118 Magnolia Drive. Every light in the house was off, which would have been normal, except that Kane had arrived here before 10 at night, and even then, even at night, the lights had been on. He'd clocked it automatically the way you clock these things when you've spent enough years paying attention to your surroundings, because your surroundings can kill you. Lights on, normal household, nothing to notice. But the lights had gone off at some point between their arrival and now. And in the upstairs window of 118 Magnolia Drive, in the darkness that should have meant the room was empty, something moved. A curtain settling back into place. Kane didn't move. He didn't look away. He stood on the sidewalk in the cold October air and looked at the upstairs window of the dark house across the street and thought about a woman who had seen everything and a man in a police car who had known exactly who to warn when the walls came closing in. Dex, he said low and even. Dex was at his elbow in 4 seconds. Yeah. House across the street. Dark. Upstairs window, left side. He didn't point, didn't gesture, just spoke. Someone's in there. Dex didn't look either. Professionals. You think Marcus tipped them? I think Marcus sent one word to one number, and that number belongs to someone in the DA's office, and the DA's office is 2 miles from here. He paused. But that text came in from someone who knows my personal number, which means it's not the DA. The DA doesn't know I exist. He looked at the window again. Someone across that street does. Someone who doesn't want us to miss them, Dex said quietly. Kane let that land. Not a threat, Darcy. Not a warning from Marcus's side. The text was not adversarial. It was informational. She saw everything, not back off or you're done. Just she saw, she knows. Go look. Someone across the street was trying to help them. I'm going to knock on that door, Kane said. You want backup? I want you on the phone with Reyes the second I go in. He handed Dex his phone. And Dex, if I'm not out in 10 minutes. You'll be out in 10 minutes, Dex said with the absolute confidence of a man who has watched Kane walk into bad situations for 15 years and come back every time. Kane crossed the street. He walked up the front path of 118 Magnolia Drive, and he knocked on the door, not a police knock, not aggressive, just a steady 3 knock, and he waited. Nothing. He knocked again. I'm not here to hurt you, he said low enough that it wouldn't carry to the street. Someone just told me you have information. I want to hear it. Silence. 10 seconds. 15. Then the sound of a chain being worked carefully and slowly, the sound of someone on the other side of a door making a decision they were not sure about. The door opened 2 inches. In the gap in the darkness was an eye dark brown, wide frightened, and below it, pressed into the gap, the hand of someone gripping the doorframe hard enough to whiten the knuckles. A woman, middle-aged, maybe older. Her breathing was audible. Are you with him? She whispered. With Marcus. No, Kane said. We're the ones who took him out. A pause. 3 seconds. 4. He has a list, she said. Her voice was barely sound. I've seen it. Names. People who know things they shouldn't. People who tried to talk. She swallowed. My name is on it. Has been for 2 years. And tonight when you all showed up, I thought. She stopped. I thought if you left and he came back and he knew I'd seen it all. He's not coming back tonight, Kane said. He's in a state police car. State police. Something shifted in her breathing. Not county. Not county, Kane confirmed. State Agent Reyes. She's across the street right now. The door opened another 2 inches. The list, the woman said. I have a copy. I made a copy 8 months ago. I didn't know who to give it to. I didn't know who was safe. She looked at him through the gap, searching his face in the dark. Are you safe? Kane thought about everything he was and everything he wasn't, and everything that had brought him to this porch on this night, and he answered the only honest way he could. Safe enough, he said. Come talk to Reyes. The door opened all the way, and the woman who walked out into the cold October air was holding a manila envelope that was worn at the edges from being handled and rehandled over 8 months of fear. 8 months of knowing something and having nowhere to put it, and she walked across the street toward Agent Reyes with the careful, deliberate steps of someone who is terrified but has decided that being terrified is no longer a good enough reason to stay quiet. Behind Kane, Lily watched from the sidewalk. She had seen everything. And somewhere in Blackwood on a phone with an unregistered number, a text message that said run sat unanswered in an inbox because whoever it had been sent to was not running. They were staying very, very still, waiting to see how much had already been lost, counting their exposure, calculating, and not yet knowing that the woman across the street had kept a copy of their name. The woman's name was Patricia Hale. She was 53 years old. She had lived at 118 Magnolia Drive for 11 years, and she had been Marcus Thorne's neighbor for 3 of them. She taught 7th grade English at Blackwood Middle School. She drove a 10-year-old Civic. She kept her hedges trimmed and her porch light on, and she brought casseroles to new neighbors, and she had been by every visible measure an unremarkable woman living an unremarkable life. And for 8 months she had been carrying a copy of a list that could bring down half the county's power structure inside a manila envelope that she kept taped behind the false bottom of her laundry room utility drawer. She sat across from Agent Reyes in the front seat of Reka's car, and she talked for 22 minutes without stopping. Kane stood outside the car. He couldn't hear the words, but he could see Patricia's hands moving fast, gesturing, pointing at the envelope, opening it, and pointing at pages, and he could see Reyes's face, which stayed controlled and professional for about 15 of those 22 minutes, and then did something that Kane suspected Agent Carol Reyes's face did not do often in the field. It went slack. Just briefly, just for 2 or 3 seconds. The face of someone encountering a fact that exceeds their existing framework. Dex materialized at Kane's shoulder. What do you think she's got? More than the files from the office, Kane said. The files were Marcus's records, his accounting of the arrangement. Whatever she has is something else, something from outside his perspective. A witness record, or documentation Marcus didn't know existed. Dex was quiet for a moment. How does a 7th grade English teacher end up with documentation that a 30-year police chief didn't know existed? Kane watched Patricia's hands. Jaisi surprise. That one, he said, is what I want to know. He found out 12 minutes later when Reyes stepped out of the car and walked directly to him with the flat, purposeful stride of someone who has just reorganized their entire understanding of a situation and is moving forward on new information. Patricia Hale's late husband, Reyes said without preamble, was a county auditor, Dennis Hale. He died 14 months ago. Heart attack officially. He had been in the 6 months before his death, compiling a financial audit of several county municipal accounts routine as far as his supervisor knew. But Dennis Hale had also been separately and privately keeping a personal record of discrepancies he'd found that he didn't know how to report because 2 of the discrepancies traced back to the office he would have reported them to. Kane felt it before she said it. The DA. The DA's office was redirecting seized asset funds, Small amounts at first hundreds, then thousands, through a series of municipal sub-accounts that Dennis Hale found by accident during an unrelated audit. He brought it to Marcus Thorne because Marcus was the chief of police and because Dennis trusted him. Because everyone trusted him. Reyes paused. That was in March 14 months ago. Dennis Hale was dead by May. The words sat in the cold air between them. The heart attack, Kane said, was medically certified by a Dr. Philip Goss, who is, before you ask, a former college roommate of District Attorney Warren Cole. She said the name plainly, like dropping a stone into still water. Cole, that's the DA, Warren Cole. Kane exhaled slowly, and Marcus knew Dennis had brought him the audit. Marcus knew, and Marcus told Cole, and Dennis Hale was dead 6 weeks later. Rhea's voice stayed level, but there was something underneath it, the careful, controlled anger of someone who has chosen a profession that requires them to see the worst of what people do to each other and find a way to keep functioning regardless. Patricia didn't know any of this when her husband died. She found Dennis's personal records 4 months later, going through his home office. Took her 2 months to understand what she was looking at. Another 2 to make copies, and then she looked across the street at Marcus Thorne watering his lawn and smiling at the neighbors, and she understood that she had absolutely nowhere to take what she knew. So she kept it, Kane said, and she waited. For 8 months she waited for something to change, for someone to come from outside the county, someone Marcus couldn't reach. And tonight she watched a group of bikers pull up to his house and walk out with his children and watch him get put in a state police car. Reyes met Kane's eyes. You were the outside she was waiting for. Kane thought about Dennis Hale. He thought about a man doing an ordinary job who had found something he wasn't supposed to find and had done the right thing, gone to the person he trusted, the person whose job it was to handle exactly this, and had been dead 6 weeks later. He thought about Patricia Hale alone in that house for 8 months with an envelope taped behind a false drawer bottom, watching her neighbors smile at people and water his lawn. What happens now, he asked. Now I make calls that go above the state level, Reyes said. What Dennis Hale documented is federal. The municipal fund redirection crosses state banking regulations. This is not a county case anymore. This is not a state case, she paused. And Cole will know that we have this. Not tonight. Tonight we have the element of surprise, but by morning when Marcus gets his phone call and calls a lawyer, who calls someone who makes a call to the DA's office. She checked her watch. We have maybe 6 hours. Then you need to move on Cole tonight. I need authorization for that. How long does authorization take? Reyes looked at him. With what I have in this envelope, less time than it usually does. She turned back toward her car. Then she stopped. Without turning around, she said, Kane, what you did tonight, the way you did it, I'm not going to pretend I can ignore the methods. You broke into a home, you removed documents, you interfered with the law enforcement. I got a 7-year-old out of a basement, Kane said. I know. She still wasn't turned around. That's why I'm standing here talking to you instead of putting you in a car. But I need you to understand that from this point forward, this is federal territory. You and your guys need to step back and let us work. Kane said nothing for 3 seconds. Are the kids safe? Yes. Sandra Vance? Yes. Patricia Hale? We'll move her tonight. Then we'll step back, Kane said, but I want to know how it ends. Reyes finally turned and looked at him over her shoulder. I'll call you, she said, and then she got in her car and got on the phone, and the organized, quiet machinery of federal law enforcement began to move in a way that Marcus Thorne and Warren Cole had spent years making sure it never would, and it was moving because a 12-year-old girl had kept a notebook in her shoe. Kane walked back to where Lily was standing. She looked at him. He looked at her. And then, because there was nothing left to do at 117 Magnolia Drive that didn't belong to Reyes's jurisdiction, now he said, Come on, let's go check on your brother. Leo was awake. That was the first thing Kane noticed when Rabbit opened the SUV door. The boy was awake and sitting up still, wrapped in the blanket, still holding the crackers, still pale and fragile looking, but awake. His eyes were dark and serious and too old for 7. The eyes of a child who has been in a situation that demanded he become older than he was and hasn't yet had the chance to unbecome it. He looked at Kane the way he had in the basement, that wide measuring look. Then he looked at Lily. Is he gone? Leo asked. Lily crouched in front of the SUV door. Yeah, she said. He's gone. Leo looked at her for another second. Then he held out one of his crackers. Lily took it. She didn't eat it. She just held it, and Kane watched something pass across her face that she had been holding back for 3 days, and possibly for much longer. Grief and relief and fury and exhaustion, all hitting at once, all hitting in the particular way they hit when you have finally let someone else hold some of the weight. She didn't cry. She was Lily Vance. She didn't cry, but her hands shook just slightly holding that cracker. Sandra was watching from the other side of Leo with an expression that Kane could not look at directly for more than a second. A mother looking at her daughter and seeing for the first time and with total clarity what that girl had been carrying alone. What Sandra herself had not carried with her. What she had let her child carry because she had been too afraid to stand up and carry it herself. The guilt in Sandra's face was not the performed guilt of someone seeking absolution. It was the raw, scalding guilt of a woman who is beginning to understand the precise shape of what her fear cost her children, and who knows that understanding it is not the same as undoing it. Lily, Sandra said. Her voice broke on the single word. Lily looked at her mother. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. Then Lily said, I know, Mom. I should have. I know, Lily said again, firmly, not coldly, not punishing, just firmly, the way you say a thing to someone you love when you need them to stop and breathe and be present instead of disappearing into what they should have done. We can talk about all of it later. Right now, Leo needs a hospital. Sandra nodded, pressed her lips together, nodded again. Kane straightened up and looked at Rabbit. Reyes said state medical, not county. You know St. Catherine's in Meredith? 40 minutes, Rabbit said. Take them. Big Tom rides with you. He looked back at Sandra. A state police escort will meet you there. You'll be safe. Sandra looked at him, really looked at him the way people look at someone. They are trying to understand completely, trying to place, trying to find the category for. A big man in a leather jacket with tattoos up his neck, who had shown up at her house tonight and broken down whatever was left of a world that had been wrong for a long time. Why did you help us? She asked. It was the same question Lily had asked hours ago in the clubhouse. And Kane gave essentially the same answer because it was the only honest one he had. Because someone should on, he said. Sandra Vance reached out and took his hand, held it for 1 second, 2. Then she let go and turned back to her children, and Rabbit started the SUV, and Kane stepped back and watched them pull out of the driveway of 117 Magnolia Drive and head toward a road that did not lead anywhere Marcus Thorne had jurisdiction. He stood there until the taillights disappeared. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen. Unknown number. Not the same unknown number as the she saw everything text different. He almost didn't answer. Then he did. Kane. The voice on the other end was male, mid-range, careful, controlled in the way of someone managing genuine fear. You don't know me. My name is Aaron Garrett. I was Marcus Thorne's patrol lieutenant. Kane said nothing. Let the silence work. I need to talk to you, Garrett said. Then talk. Not on the phone, a pause. I have something I've been holding for 2 years because I didn't know what to do with it, and I was scared. Marcus has reach. You know he has reach. But tonight, watching what happened on Magnolia, someone sent me a text. Someone told me what you found, about Cole. Another pause. If Cole goes down, if this actually goes all the way, I need to get ahead of it. I need to be on the right side of this before it closes. What do you have? Kane asked. Evidence that Dennis Hale's death was not a heart attack. The night went very still around Kane. Where are you? Kane said. Parking lot behind the Riverside Diner. Off Route 9, 10 minutes from you. Don't move, Kane said. He hung up and immediately called Reyes. She picked up on the second ring. He talked. She listened. And then she said something that surprised him. I already have Garrett flagged. He filed an internal complaint 18 months ago that was buried before it reached my level. He's been a loose end for Marcus for a long time. A pause. Don't go alone. I'm taking Dex. I'll have someone there in 15. Kane looked at Dex, who had heard enough to have his jacket already on. They rode to the Riverside Diner in under 8 minutes. Aaron Garrett was exactly what his name suggested. Not large, not imposing, not the kind of man you'd look at twice. He was maybe 42, lean and angular, standing beside his personal car, with his hands in his jacket pockets and the expression of a man who has been rehearsing this moment for a long time and is now discovering that the rehearsal did not adequately prepare him for the reality. He looked at Kane. He looked at Dex. He looked at the bikes. "You're really bikers," he said. "You're really a lieutenant," Kane said. "Let's skip that part. What do you have?" Garrett reached into his inside jacket pocket and produced a USB drive. Small, standard, the kind that held files. He held it out toward Kane and seemed to reconsider and pulled it back slightly. "I need immunity," he said. "Before I hand this over, I'm not the person who gives immunity," Kane said flatly. "I'm the person who decides whether to pick up the phone and call the federal agent who is currently 15 minutes away and who will be very interested in what you're holding. That's what I can do for you. That's all." Garrett looked at the USB drive in his own hand. Something moved through him, the last internal argument of a man choosing between self-preservation and the thing that preserves what's left of yourself when everything else is gone. The night Dennis Hale died, Garrett said, I was on duty, and I got a call from Marcus' personal call, not dispatch, telling me to route all units away from the east side. He said there was a situation developing on the west side that needed coverage. There was nothing on the west side. I drove the west side myself, and there was absolutely nothing. He paused. The call that reported Dennis Hale's heart attack came from his home address at 11:47 p.m. The ambulance arrived in 14 minutes. But there is a gap, a 7-minute gap in the response log that doesn't match the dispatch timestamp. 7 minutes of official record that says the ambulance was en route when it wasn't. He held up the USB. I pulled the raw dispatch data before it was corrected. The corrected version is in the official record. The raw version is on here. Kane and Dex looked at each other. You've had this for 2 years, Dex said. Yes. And you said nothing. Garrett's jaw tightened. I have a daughter. She's 9. Marcus knew where she went to school. He knew which route my wife drives to work. He never said anything explicit he didn't have to. That's how he operated. He never said the thing directly. He just made sure you knew he could. His voice was steady, but his hands were not. I am not proud of what I didn't do, but I'm standing here now. A car pulled into the lot, Reyes's car or one of hers. A woman got out, badge on her belt, and walked toward them with quick, efficient steps. Garrett looked at Kane. Is it too late, he said, to do the right thing? Is it too late? Kane looked at him for a long moment. He thought about Patricia Hale in her house for 8 months. He thought about Dennis Hale and a 7-minute gap in a dispatch record. He thought about Sandra Vance crying outside a basement door and not opening it. He thought about all the people who had been close enough to this thing to stop it and had not because they were evil, but because Marcus Thorne had been very precise and very deliberate about making sure the cost of stopping it seemed higher than the cost of looking away. Give her the drive, Kane said. Garrett handed it to the agent without another word. He started talking before she even asked him a question, just opened, and kept going, the release of a man who has been sealed under pressure for 2 years and has finally found a place to let it out. The agent's recorder was on, her notepad was out, and in the parking lot of the Riverside Diner on Route 9 at 20 minutes to midnight, the last piece of the architecture that Marcus Thorne had spent 30 years building began to come apart at the foundation. Kane sat on his bike and let Dex handle the logistics, contact numbers, chain of custody for the drive. Garrett's preliminary statement, and he looked up at the Tennessee sky and breathed. His phone buzzed. A text from Hatch, still back at Magnolia Drive, doing God knows what meticulous thing he always did in the final sweep of any situation. The text said, found something else, the wisp Patricia mentioned. A copy, in a different location than the office. Kane texted back, where? Hatch replied, lining of the coat in the front hall closet. Sewn in, Marcus kept a backup copy on himself. Kane stared at that for a long time. A backup copy sewn into a coat lining, kept in the front hallway where Marcus could grab it if he ever needed to leave fast. The emergency exit plan of a man who always knew this day might come, who had somewhere underneath all his arrogance and certainty carried a quiet awareness that things can unravel, that even the most carefully constructed systems have a weight limit. He had prepared for running. He had sewn the list into his coat. And then tonight, in whatever panic overtook him when he heard footsteps in his house and came downstairs to find Kane standing in his hallway with a padlock in his hand. He had forgotten about it, left the house without the coat. Or he had been so certain that his name and his badge and his 30 years would be enough that he had simply not reached for it. Either way, the list was still in the coat. And the list, according to Patricia Hale, had names on it. Names of people who knew too much. Names of people Marcus had monitored, managed, occasionally threatened. A document that was not evidence of past crimes, but a blueprint of ongoing control, the map of a machine that had been running in Blackwood for years quietly and efficiently and completely below the notice of anyone who wasn't already trapped inside it. Kane texted Reyes. She responded in 4 seconds. I'm on my way back to the house. Do not touch the coat. He texted Hatch. Don't touch the coat. Hatch replied. Already photographed. Hands clean? Of course they were. It was 12:15 a.m. when Kane finally rode back toward the clubhouse. Dex rode beside him. The road was empty. The deep Tennessee night quiet in the way that places only get quiet after something large has happened in them, like the air itself is catching its breath. He was almost at Route 9 when Dex pulled up alongside him at a stoplight and shouted over the engines. You think it holds? Kane thought about Agent Reyes reorganizing her understanding of an entire situation in real time and not missing a step. He thought about Patricia Hale's envelope and Garrett's USB drive, and the list sewn into a coat lining, and the photographs of the files that were already sitting in cloud accounts from Nashville to Charlotte. He thought about the 7-minute gap in a dispatch record that Marcus had corrected and Aaron Garrett had preserved and a federal agent now had in her hands. It holds, Kane said. The light changed. They were almost back to the clubhouse, the gravel lot off Route 9, the chain link fence, the no trespassing sign, when Kane's phone rang again. This time he recognized the number immediately. It was Rabbit, he answered. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Rabbit said quickly. Nothing's wrong. Leo's fine. They're at Street. Catherine's doctors are with him. A pause. But Kane, the doctor who came in to look at Leo, she was looking at his records, and she said she'd seen Leo before. Treated him about a year ago. Bruised ribs officially reported as a fall from a bicycle. Another pause. She said she filed a complaint with county CPS at the time. She never heard back. Kane waited. She said the complaint was received and logged, Rabbit continued, and then it just stopped. Went nowhere. She followed up twice and both times was told it was under review. He paused one more time. The CPS case coordinator assigned to the file was a woman named Dina Cole. Cole. Kane's hand tightened on the phone. Say that last name again. Cole, Rabbit said. D-E-N-A Cole. She's listed as a county CPS coordinator. I'm looking at the file right now. The doctor pulled it up. Is she related to Warren Cole? A pause while Rabbit looked it up. There's a Warren Cole listed as next of kin on her county employee record. A beat. That's the DA. It was his wife, or his sister, or his daughter. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Warren Cole's reach had not been limited to redirecting municipal funds and certifying a heart attack. His reach had extended into child protective services, into the exact system that was supposed to catch what Marcus was doing at home. The complaint that the doctor had filed a year ago about Leo, the complaint that should have triggered an investigation, should have sent someone to 117 Magnolia Drive, should have gotten Leo and Lily out of that house 12 months before tonight, had been assigned to a coordinator with the last name Cole, and had gone nowhere. Leo had spent another year in that house because of it. Another year. He had been 7 in the basement. He would have been 6 when that complaint was filed, and a woman named Cole had let it die on her desk, and nobody had come. Kane sat on his bike in the parking lot of his own clubhouse and felt the full weight of that land on him. Not as rage, because he had moved past rage somewhere on Magnolia Drive and come out the other side into something colder and more durable. Not rage. Resolve. Tell the doctor to document everything, he said. Everything she sees tonight. Everything she remembers from a year ago. Every conversation she had with DPS, written, signed tonight. He paused. And tell her she's going to get a call from an agent, Carol Reyes, and she should answer it. Got it, Rabbit said. Kane hung up, sat in the silence of the parking lot. Then he called Reyes one more time. She answered on the first ring. Cole's wife, she said before Kane could even speak. I know, it just hit my desk 30 seconds ago. We're already moving. How far does this go? Kane asked. Reyes was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Further than tonight, she said. But tonight is where it ends. She hung up. Kane sat in the dark of the parking lot and thought about a 12-year-old girl with a notebook in her shoe who had spent 3 days mapping a machine that had been running for years, who had walked through a door that said no trespassing and stood in a room full of men who scared most of Blackwood and said the words that cracked the first stone loose, who had handed him a key from behind a can of tomatoes and watched him use it, who had stood on a sidewalk with one shoe on and one shoe off and watched Marcus Thorne walk to a police car in handcuffs and not cheered, not cried, just watched, with the careful, exhausted attention of someone who needed to see the thing all the way through before she could let herself believe it. And he thought about Leo eating crackers in the back of a car. And he thought about Dennis Hale, who had done the right thing and had not been protected, and about every person whose name was on a list sewn into a coat lining, and about a 7-minute gap in a dispatch record that one scared man had preserved for 2 years because some part of him had known that someday it would matter. He got off the bike, walked inside. The clubhouse was mostly empty, now guys out on their assigned cover positions, some already filtering back. Big Tom was at the bar with a cup of coffee and an expression of thoughtful exhaustion. He looked up when Kane came in. "How bad is it?" Big Tom asked. Kane sat down on a bar stool. "Bad enough that it's going to take a long time to fix," he said, "but it's moving." Big Tom nodded, set a second cup of coffee in front of Kane. "The girl did good," he said. "The girl did everything," Kane said. They sat in the quiet of the clubhouse, the two of them, and drank their coffee, and outside on Route 9 the occasional car passed with its headlights sweeping briefly across the chain-link fence and the no trespassing sign. And somewhere 40 minutes north, a doctor was writing down everything she remembered about a 6-year-old boy with bruised ribs. And somewhere in a federal holding facility, Marcus Thorne was sitting with the understanding that the one phone call he was entitled to would reach a lawyer who would reach a DA who was at this precise moment being visited by federal agents who had not called ahead. And in a hospital room in Meredith, Tennessee, Leo Vance was asleep for the first time in 4 days in a bed with clean sheets in his mother's hand holding his, and Lily was in the chair beside the bed with her notebook open on her knee, not writing, just holding it the way you hold something that got you through the worst part of something. The list in the coat, the gap in the record, the files in the office, the envelope in the drawer, the photographs in the cloud, the notebook in the shoe. All of it building, all of it moving, all of it converging on a reckoning that Marcus Thorne had spent 30 years making sure would never come, and that was coming anyway because one girl had been paying attention when nobody thought she was and had walked through a door in the rain with her lips split and her eyes swollen and said the 9 words that started all of it. By morning, Blackwood would not be the same town it had been at 9 o'clock on a Thursday night. By morning, several things that had been hidden for a very long time would not be hidden anymore. And in the federal holding facility, Marcus Thorne's one phone call went to voicemail. Warren Cole was not answering. Warren Cole did not answer because Warren Cole was already in his car. He had been in his car for 11 minutes when the federal agents arrived at his front door, had pulled out of his driveway on Briarwood Lane at 12:03 a.m. No headlights for the first block, moving with the particular careful urgency of a man who has been waiting for a moment like this for long enough that he had a route plan. He had a bag in the trunk. He had Gishim. He had a second ID that had cost him $8,000 6 years ago, and that he had genuinely prayed he would never need to use. He needed it now. He had gotten Marcus's message, the single word run, and he had sat with it for 47 minutes telling himself it was manageable, telling himself Marcus would handle it, telling himself that whatever was happening on Magnolia Drive was local and contained and would be cleaned up by morning the way things in Blackwood had always been cleaned up. Then his wife Dina had called him from her personal cell, not the house line, and said 4 words in a voice stripped of everything except bare animal fear. They have the drive. Cole had been in his car in 90 seconds. He didn't know about Patricia Hale. He didn't know about Aaron Garrett. He didn't know about the photographs in 4 cloud accounts, or the list sewn into a coat lining, or the notebook in a 12-year-old girl's shoe. He only knew about the drive, Garrett's drive, the dispatch records, because Dina had heard it from someone inside the county system who had heard it from someone else, the information moving through Marcus's network, the way information moves through any network built on mutual self-interest fast and getting faster, and by the time it reached Cole, it had already passed through enough hands that he understood the machine was not just damaged. It was coming apart. He drove north on Route 12. He had a plan. He had always had a plan. He did not know that Agent Carol Reyes had anticipated this. Reyes had flagged Cole's personal vehicle at 11:58 p.m., 2 minutes before Cole got in it, based on a detail in Patricia Hale's documentation that described Cole using his personal car, not his official vehicle, for 3 specific meetings with Marcus over the past 2 years. Meetings that were not on any official calendar. Reyes had run the plates, put out a quiet watch request to State Highway Patrol, and gone back to processing evidence. She did not chase. She waited. Because men like Warren Cole always had a route planned, and routes have endpoints, and endpoints can be covered. The Highway Patrol unit stopped Cole's car at 12:31 a.m. on Route 12, 11 miles north of Blackwood, 8 miles short of the state line. Kane got the text from Reyes at 12:34, Cole in custody. Both of them. It's done for tonight. He read it twice, set his phone on the bar, picked up his coffee. Big Tom looked at him. Both of them, Kane said. Big Tom let out a long, slow breath that he seemed to have been holding since approximately 9 o'clock. Good, he said. Just that. Good. Kane drank his coffee and said nothing and let the night settle around him. It was not done, he knew that. Done for tonight was not done. There were lawyers coming and hearings and motions in the grinding, slow machinery of prosecution that would take months, possibly years, to finish the work that had started in the space of 3 hours on a Thursday night. There were names on a list sewn into a coat lining. There were people in this county who had been part of what Marcus and Cole had built and who were right now making their own calculations about what to do next. Some of them would cooperate. Some would fight. Some would disappear the way people disappear when they have enough money and enough warning and enough absence of conscience to simply go. But Marcus was in custody. Cole was in custody. The files were photographed and in federal hands. The drive was in federal hands. Patricia Hale was in a safe location. Garrett had given his statement. Dennis Hale's death, the 7-minute gap, the rerouted units, the certified heart attack, was now part of a federal investigation that would not be assigned to anyone in Blackwood County. And Leo was asleep in a clean bed in Meredith, Tennessee, with his mother's hand holding his. That was tonight. Tonight was enough. Kane was still at the bar at 2 a.m. when his phone rang. He looked at the screen. Rabbit. Leo's stable, Rabbit said. Doctor says he's dehydrated and undernourished, but there's no permanent damage. He needs a week of monitoring and then he's going to be fine. A pause that carried something warm in it, something relieved and human. He asked for more crackers, Kane. The hospital gave him a whole pack and he ate every single one. Kane laughed. It surprised him the laugh came out before he knew it was coming. Real and short and genuine, the laugh of a man who needed to release something and found it in a 7-year-old boy eating crackers in a hospital bed. And Lillian, he asked. Still in the chair, Rabbit said. Won't leave the room. The nurses tried to get her to go rest in the family lounge, and she looked at them like they'd suggested she fly to the moon. Let her stay. Already told them that. A pause, though. Sandra's talking. To a social worker, the hospital brought in a state one, not county. She's been talking for about an hour. She looks like someone who's been underwater for 3 years and just came up for air. Kane thought about Sandra walking past Marcus in the hallway without looking at him. He thought about how much it costs a person to do that, to walk past the thing they've been afraid of, close enough to touch it and not look. The cost of that walk was 3 years of accumulated fear reaching a breaking point, and what was on the other side of it was a woman who was just beginning to understand what she was capable of when the fear was finally smaller than something else. Good, Kane said. That's good. He hung up, finished his coffee. Then he did something he almost never did. He went to the small back office of the clubhouse, sat down at the desk, and he wrote. Not a report, not a list, just words. The way his own father had never written anything down and had gone to his grave with everything still locked inside him. Kane wrote down what had happened tonight. Not the operational details, those he would remember. He wrote down the moment Lily walked in the door. He wrote down the look on her face when she heard Leo say her name from the basement dark. He wrote down the cracker, the one Leo held out, and Lily took with her shaking hand. He didn't know why he was writing it. He just knew it needed to be written somewhere. that it shouldn't only live in his memory, where it would blur and compress and lose its edges over time the way all memories do. He wrote for 20 minutes. Then he folded the paper and put it in his jacket pocket and went back out to the bar. The next morning came hard and fast. By 7 a.m., the Blackwood Courier's website had a breaking news banner: Police Chief Marcus Thorne arrested, federal investigation underway. By 8, it had been picked up by the state wire. By 9, the national feeds had it. By 10, there were 2 news vans parked outside the Blackwood County Courthouse, and a third one setting up on Magnolia Drive, and the people of Blackwood were standing in their kitchens and their driveways and their office break rooms, looking at their phones with a particular stunned expression of a community discovering that the thing they most trusted was the thing they most should have questioned. Kane watched none of it. He was at St. Catherine's Hospital in Meredith by 9:30, and the nurse at the pediatric ward desk looked at him. Big man, leather jacket, tattoos, and started to say that visiting hours didn't begin until 10, and then Lily appeared at the end of the hallway and said, "He's with us," in a voice that carried complete authority, and the nurse did not say anything further. Leo was sitting up in bed eating scrambled eggs with the serious, focused application of someone with important work to do. He looked better, not all the way better, not the way a child looks after a week of proper sleep and meals and safety, but better than last night, which was all that mattered this morning. More color, more steadiness in his eyes, less of that frightened animal stillness. He looked up when Kane came in. "You're the biker," Leo said. "I am," Kane said. Leo considered this with the gravity of a 7-year-old processing important information. "Lily said you helped." "Lily did most of it," Kane said. Leo looked at his sister, then back at Kane. Then he held out his fork, which had a small piece of scrambled egg on it, in the universal gesture of a child offering to share the thing they value most. Kane sat down on the edge of the chair beside the bed and accepted the piece of egg. Lily watched this from across the room with an expression that was not quite a smile and not quite crying, and was somewhere in between and was entirely her own. Sandra was not in the room. She was down the hall with the social worker still talking, still in that open, pouring conversation that had been going for hours, the kind of conversation that only happens when someone has carried something alone for so long that the moment they find a safe place to set it down, they cannot stop. Kane had passed her in the hallway, and she had looked at him and said simply, "Thank you." He had nodded. They did not need more than that. It was 11:15 when Reyes called. Kane stepped out of Leo's room into the hallway to take it. "Tell me," he said. "Cole is cooperating," and Reyes said. She sounded like someone who had not slept and had no intention of sleeping until the work was done. "Full cooperation as of 40 minutes ago. He's trading everything for a sentencing recommendation." "Marcus is not cooperating. Marcus is still insisting on his own importance, which is working about as well as you'd expect." A brief pause. "The list from the coat lining has 14 names on it. 11 of them are county or municipal employees. 2 are private citizens. Patricia Hale is one of them. The third is Dennis Hale." "Dennis was on the list," Kane said. "Dennis was on the list before he died. Marcus kept him on it afterward." Her voice was flat and precise, but underneath it was the controlled anger Kane had heard in her before. "We believe it was Marcus's way of tracking the threat, keeping a record of who knew what, whether they were alive or not." Kane stood in the hospital hallway and breathed. "And Dennis's death?" "Cole confirmed it this morning," and Reyes said. "Not a heart attack. Medication interaction administered. Someone got access to Dennis's home during the window when Marcus had routed the units away. We don't have the direct actor yet, but we have Cole's confirmation that Marcus told him it was handled. That's conspiracy. That's enough to build on." The hallway felt very quiet around Kane. He thought about Patricia Hale making casseroles for her neighbors and keeping her hedges trimmed and sleeping every night across the street from the man who had arranged her husband's death. 11 years in that house, 3 of them knowing what she knew. "Patricia needs to know," he said. "I'm calling her next," Reyes said. "After you." A pause. "The DA's office is being taken over by the state AG pending investigation. The CPS file on Leo, the one Dana Cole buried, has been flagged and reopened and added to the federal case. Dana Cole was picked up this morning." Another pause. "It goes without saying, but I'll say it, none of this happens without what you brought us last night. The files, the phone, Garrett, Patricia, every single one of those came through you. Through that girl. Through Lily, Kane said. Through Lily, Reyes agreed. How is she? He looked through the small window in Leo's room door. Lily was sitting in the chair beside her brother's bed, and Leo had apparently finished his eggs and was now leaning against her arm, with his eyes half closed, the boneless, comfortable lean of a small child who has found the exact person they feel safest with. Lily had her notebook open on her knee. She was writing something. She's writing in her notebook, Kane said. A brief pause on Reyes's end. What's she writing? I don't know, Kane said. Whatever comes next, I guess. He went back into the room. Lily looked up when he came in. Leo had fully fallen asleep against her arm, and she was holding very still in the particular way of someone who does not want to disturb a sleeping child, had probably been doing this her whole life, holding still, so Leo could rest. Reyes, she asked. Cole is cooperating, Kane said. Both of them are in custody. Dennis Hale's case is being reopened. Lily absorbed this. Her pen moved once across the page, a single line, something short, and then she closed the notebook. Is it really over? She asked. Kane thought about 14 names on a list. He thought about the long pull of federal prosecution. He thought about lawyers and hearings and the slow grinding months ahead. He thought about Sandra and what it was going to take to rebuild a life from the particular wreckage that 3 years with Marcus Thorne had made of it. He thought about Leo, who was 7 and had spent 4 days in a basement and was going to have to grow up carrying that, working through it, finding a way to set it down without losing himself in the process. He thought about all of that, and then he answered Lily the only honest way he could. The part where he has any power over you, he said. That part is over, she held his gaze. That's the part that mattered, she said. Yes, he said, it is. Leo stirred in his sleep, a small sound, one hand reaching for Lily's sleeve without waking, and Lily reached over and covered his hand with hers, steady and automatic, the reflex of someone who has been doing it for so long, it has become part of how she moves through the world. 3 weeks later, the Iron Skulls clubhouse received a letter. No return address on the envelope, but the handwriting on the front was small and careful and instantly recognizable. Inside was a single folded page. No greeting, no preamble. Just this in the same careful script, and that had filled a spiral notebook in the dark of a house on Magnolia Drive. I started a new notebook. This one doesn't go in my shoe. I put it on my desk. Leo colored the cover. He used green because he says it's the color of things that are still growing. I think he's right. We're staying with my aunt in Nashville while Mom figures things out. She's in therapy. So am I. Leo has a doctor he likes. I'm back in school. My teacher said I'm good at writing. I've been thinking about what I want to do when I grow up. I think I want to work with kids who are in bad situations and don't know who to ask for help. I think I'd be good at it. I know what it feels like to not know who's safe. I know what it feels like to choose. Thank you for being the right door. Lily Kane read it standing at the bar. Then he read it again. Then he folded it and put it in his jacket pocket next to the paper he had written on the night everything happened. He did not show it to anyone. Some things belong to the people who live them. In the months that followed, the case moved the way Reyes had said it would, slowly, thoroughly, with the weight of federal machinery behind it. Marcus Thorne was indicted on 14 counts, including child abuse, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy in the death of Dennis Hale. Warren Cole pleaded guilty to 12 counts and received a sentence that did not satisfy everyone, but put him away long enough to matter. Dina Cole resigned and faced separate charges related to her handling of child welfare files. Aaron Garrett testified for the prosecution and was given conditional immunity. Patricia Hale sat in a courthouse for 2 days and told a federal jury everything she had seen and everything she had known and everything her husband had died trying to expose, and she did not waver once. The Blackwood County power structure that Marcus had spent 30 years assembling did not survive contact with what Lily Vance had assembled in 3 days, with a spiral notebook and a plan. And the Iron Skulls, the outlaw motorcycle club at the end of Route 9 with the no trespassing sign, and the members with records went back to being exactly what the town of Blackwood had always thought they were. Unremarkable, unimportant, not worth paying attention to, which was Kane had always found exactly the right way to be, because the people who needed the right door found it anyway. They always did. On a Tuesday morning in November, 6 weeks after the night everything changed, Kane rode past St. Catherine's Hospital on his way back from Nashville. He didn't stop. He didn't need to. He just rode past it with the cold November air coming through his jacket and thought about a 7-year-old boy eating crackers in the dark and his sister's voice finding him in it, in the sound that had made the specific sound of two people who belonged to each other, locating each other across the worst thing that has ever happened to them. He thought about that sound for a long time. Then he turned on to Route 9 and rode home, and the road was clear and cold and long, and the Iron Skulls clubhouse was exactly where he'd left it, and the no trespassing sign was still on the fence, and everything was exactly as it had been before. Except that it wasn't, because nothing is exactly as it was before when something true has moved through it. A 12-year-old girl had walked through a door in the rain with one shoe on and her lips split and a notebook in her shoe and 9 words that cracked 30 years of corruption down to the foundation. She had chosen the right door, and the right door had been waiting for her all along.